Just waiting for one of these old books to have been bound in the middle of the Black Death or something. Be taking all of this glue apart and breathing it in. Reintroduction of Yersinia pestis to Virginia. Yay! Yeah, here you can see some of the cord that was used to bind it is still in place. It's nearly powder, but it's still there. You can see that there originally was a little bit of gold leaf detailing on the spine. It's long gone now, but there's a tiny bit of it left. It's interesting. You can see all of the original sewing that was done to sew the volume together. Some of it's still there. This is not just old glue holding this thing together. Yeah, see it there? This is November 1966. I wish I had books 1 through 3. I'm sure they're out there somewhere. Maybe someday I'll get a hold of them. I promise I'll introduce actual music once I figure out the whole licensing and rights. I won't leave you guys hanging with my boring commentary. Oh, that's interesting. Well, back when paper was precious, you didn't waste it if it was short. See that? This is an edge piece to paper. You can see it's gotten thinner at the edge and it's got a natural edge, so it's good to know they didn't waste it. Wonder where the rest of it is. I'm sure I'll find it soon. Any other loose glue? Let's see if we can get the weakest solvent to loosen some of this up. Weakest solvent being water. I'll try with a small amount first. I don't remember if animal glue is dissolved by water or not. I mean, it's definitely going to weaken the paper, but not as bad as modern paper, fortunately. I get a little bit. If only the leather's going to fall apart. Let's see if I can slide in between two signatures here. Break some of that glue apart. There we go. There we go. I'm not sure how close I'll be able to focus. I'm bringing it up so close so I can see it. Still kind of stuck on. There we go. So it does seem to be a water-soluble glue that's on the spine, which is good news. Don't have to use any harsher chemicals to get it to release from the paper. I could just pull it off the paper, but when you start doing that, you start shredding the backs of the paper. So you have folded pieces of paper that you've just torn that fold off. I've done it before on another book, one of the first ones I processed, but it's not the best way to do it. And it's definitely not conservation quality because you're destroying instead of saving. I'm doing a little bit of that with some of my removal, but it's not destroying that fold, not entirely. Not yet, anyhow. So what inspired me to start this is, well, I do take videos and post time-lapse videos of some of the work I do, but the slow TV movement in Europe, can't remember if it's Sweden or Finland, but they have a channel where you watch people doing things by hand, things that take time, things that are slow, and apparently it was quite the runaway hit. They followed a bunch of people who did knitting and a whole number of other things, and had a lot of people comment that they really like watching the work as it comes along. Yeah, isn't that lovely? Yeah, but that came off nicely. You can see that there's going to be some water stains here from where I've applied the water. But it is distilled water, so it shouldn't be bad. It's just redistribution of all the crap that's on the paper right now. Once I have this all taken apart, I'm going to put it into a bath and wash it, and that should remove a lot of the minerals from water damage, the dirt, the grime from fingers handling it for 200 years. Hopefully. It depends on the paper. Paper can be a really finicky bastard sometimes. So let's get some more of my high-tech solvent here on the next patch of leather and glue. Get it soaking. Yeah, that's lovely. You can see some of the gold gilt coming through when you wet the leather. What it used to look like. I don't currently have the ability to gild any of the books that I finish. Hopefully within a year or two I'll have graduated up to that point. But right now I'm just working on saving things. Fortunately, I do have photo documentation of the whole volume before I started working on it, so I'll be able to try and restore it back to similar way it looked, at least. I'm going to use the same binding sewing methods, so that won't be a problem. So it'll have the same kind of spine and hopefully the same binding method, but we'll see. We'll see what I can manage with this. By the way, if you can't tell, I'm entirely new at Twitch. I don't have a single live watcher right now, which is fine. I mean, I do the majority of my work alone anyhow. But I figure someone someday will watch it. In a weird way, I kind of feel like Bob Ross. Let's make some happy little papers, shall we? Don't worry though, I won't be using any paint in this one. Don't think. Might have to. One thing that bothers me the most so far about this is that I listen to a lot of music and podcasts when I work. And of course, property and streaming rights are something else altogether. So I've got to find some channels I can listen to while I do this. If I'm going to continue doing Twitch, we'll see. In the meantime, please forgive my ignorance. On using Twitch and the platform. Beast. Additionally, if there are any other archivists or conservators who'd end up watching this, if you see me doing something that seems wrong to you, please let me know. I'm always glad to exchange notes with other people in the field. But if you're not in the field and you have any questions or comments about what I'm doing, please feel free to chime in. Two happy little signatures with crap on the spine. See, yeah, you can see that it's gonna try and do some staining there. There's gonna be a mark. It's alright. We'll wash and clean that page. We'll take care of it. There we go. guess it takes a special sort of satisfaction, special sort of person to get satisfaction out of cleaning up a mess like this. I don't mind being that kind of person. I'm just hoping that the others out there will also enjoy it. So what do you think? Go into more leather or take care of some of the paper backing? Ugh. Let's take care of some of that paper backing, get it off there. Let me see if I can find where the signatures separate here. Oh, this is just one. Ew. All this glue in between. Glue the hell out of this. Doing all right, sweetie? My assistant wishes to greet you. Hi. This is my service dog, Koira. She's still in training, but she keeps me company here while I work. Of course, this comes with natural mandatory play breaks in the middle of the day. How's it smell? Interesting? Getting lonely on the floor there? Good girl. So if this glue really is water soluble, then when we wash the papers, it should dissolve or at least come off easier. So I'm not going to try and scrape the signatures to get all the glue off. especially not while the paper is wet, because that'll just do more damage to the paper. And when I glue this back up, glue it together, I'm going to use wheat starch paste, which is just a thick paste made from wheat starch, hence the name. But it's entirely water soluble, so sticking with the ideas of preservation and conservation, it's entirely reversible without causing damage to the original item. So if someday someone decides they don't like the gluing I did, they can dunk it in water and undo it all. There's a lot of pluses and negatives to that. Let's see if I can get these signatures apart. There we go. You can see this one is trying to steal a page from the other signature. There we go. I think this one's done it too. Ta-da! And before I put the book back together, I'll mend those tears. There we go. 200-year-old glue. I did a good bit of work for the Fredericksburg Circuit Courthouse archives, and it's amazing the kinds of things that you can get from old glue. The archivist there processed this before I got there, but he said that there was a series of papers that he'd collected from someone who had lived over a Swiss chocolate shop in Europe, and he said while he was cleaning and processing the papers, everything smelled like chocolate, which I thought was so cool. One that I processed, I was getting a lot of old glue off of paper, and you could smell men's cologne. So whoever glued it up was wearing a little too much that day. Who's joined me? Who is that there? Someone I know? Someone I don't know? Oh, welcome to the extremely slow, painstaking process of cleaning and doing conservation work on a book published in 1800. Right now I'm just using a bit of distilled water to soften up some of the old glue used here so I can get the old leather and binding paper off of the bind so I can separate it out. It's interesting to see how the glue has changed over the last 200 years. There's very little glue we use nowadays that can be dissolved with water, which is why Like the glue that I'll be mending this with is made from wheat starch. There's nothing else produced that will do that now. There's a couple of different kinds of glues that they make for this kind of work. I'm using wheat starch because that's what my supplier had, but they also make rice starch. And it comes in just a powder. You mix it with water and you get kind of a sludge that you can glue things up with, and it's surprisingly strong. Makes me wonder if this animal glue originally was this dark brown or if it's just age that's done it. Maybe I'll have to do an experiment later on and try and make my own and see. There we go. Just leave a comment or a note or something and yell at me if this isn't in focus. The camera's kind of at a weird angle, so it's hard for me to tell exactly. But no, so far this glue doesn't smell like anything in particular, so nobody with excessive cologne glued this up. It's not yet. You never know what you're going to run into when you go through books like this. I was taking apart and processing a book that was about 156 years old. It came from Hagerstown, Maryland, and it was in German. It was an old prayer book or Psalms book or something. And I found all sorts of stuff in the binding. I try and save things that I find in the binding, especially bugs, because I think it's just really cool. But in the binding of that, I found 2 very tiny black bird feathers and a lot of men's whiskers, short whiskers, and a lot of red clay and dirt and sand. And there was one particular section where he must have been eating lunch while he was reading it because it was covered in food crumbs. It was the weirdest thing. 156-year-old food crumbs. Unfortunately, I hadn't started saving everything I get out of books when I was processing that one, so I didn't save any of that stuff, which makes me a little sad because there's some really cool stuff in that book. Yeah, if you're interested in 156-year-old men's whiskers and dirt. Still, though, if I had a microscope, I could probably spend some time and draw a lot of conclusions about the person who'd owned the book at the time by examining what I pulled out of it. It was a really dirty book, so I think he probably carried it with him everywhere he went and read it outside or read it with dirty hands. There's a good chance he was an immigrant from Germany. That area of Maryland had a large population of German immigrants. And considering it was old school Fraktur German, which isn't too common now. balance. There's going to be a lot of ambient car noise in the background. I apologize for that. I live on a really busy road, and we live relatively close to the road, so we get all that noise. I'm doing this, you've got to be really careful since I'm using water to dissolve some of the glue. It can also weaken the paper, so I've got to be really gentle and make sure that I'm putting the stress on the glue and the old leather instead of the paper. Paper's going to be stronger than normal paper, I mean normal modern day paper, because it's a cotton linen blend that they used to make paper out of. But even then, you can still tear it apart. If you've ever handled old books, though, you can tell the difference. The paper feels different. Something I really like. I like the texture of it. I don't know if you can see, but my workspace gets very, very gross while I'm doing this. I often take my glasses off to do some of this work because I'm really nearsighted, so I don't need like a magnified lens to look through, because I can just do it without glasses. But if I ever get my head too far in and I'm blocking your view, just yell at me and let me know. Sometimes you can tell where signatures separate because you get these cracks down the spine that run right along there. So somebody at some point has opened the book to that one spot and really pressed it open to break the spine like that. Yeah, see? The magic of water. Let's see, if the leather had been conditioned and taken care of in its lifetime, then it wouldn't be doing this. It's probably had dry rot at one or several points of its life that's kind of disintegrated the fibers of the leather. There we go. So from what I can tell, it's sewn in 4 places, those 2 and these 2 at the end. So as I'm going through all of this, I don't expect to run into any strings. But like with anything that's handmade, you never know what you're gonna run into. I've considered trying to recover some of the gold leaf from this, but I mean, as thin as they get it when they apply it, you really can't get much gold from it. I mean, I'd have to collect for a few decades before I had an ounce. Unfortunately, not every book that I restore needs quite this level of attention, or else I'd probably never get anything done. Still be busy on the first book I started. Oh, come on, you. There we go. Yeah, when the spine gets torn apart and the papers get frayed, then you start losing track of which papers belong to which signature. So you've got to be really gentle and try and pay attention. There we go. There's the first 2 signatures. Let's see if I can get the first one separated out. Oh. Yeah, see. The cord that it was sewn to has almost entirely disintegrated, but for some reason the string that holds the signatures together and that are supposed to hold it onto the cord, the string is still there. It's not fallen apart like the cord has. If you really wanted, you could probably take and analyze this too and tell what it's made of. And from the looks of it, I'd say it's linen. Has too much of a plant-like fiber stringing off of it. That paper belongs to that signature, so that's part of the second signature. So let's see if I can keep them together. Get some of this crap off.